the questions from Mamasapano did not disappear. They remained in reports, in hearings, in the quiet aftermath of grief. But before they could fully settle, something else began to take shape. An election season, slow at first, almost unnoticed. Then steadily, unmistakably, it grew. Public attention shifted, from investigations to personalities, from unanswered questions to promises of change. The language changed, less about what went wrong, more about what could come next. Mamasapano was no longer the center of conversation, not because it had been resolved, but because something louder had arrived. Campaigns filled the airwaves, debates replaced briefings. Certainty was offered where complexity once stood. The tragedy was folded into history before its lessons had fully surfaced. Its questions were not erased. They were overshadowed. As the country moved toward 2016, the national focus changed direction, from reflection to decision, from accountability to choice. Before the story of Mamasapano could fully conclude, another headline took its place. And once again, the pattern continued. By the start of 2016, the country was carrying unfinished conversations. Mamasapano had not fully settled. Investigations were still referenced. Questions remained open. But attention was already shifting. The election season arrived quietly at first. Not as a disruption, but as a replacement. What began as background noise slowly became the main conversation. The language changed. Less about investigations, less about unresolved loss, more about direction, more about leadership, more about what the country needed next. Candidates spoke of certainty, of decisiveness, of order, of moving forward. For a public tired of complexity, these promises felt easier to hold on to than unanswered questions. Mamasapano did not disappear from record, but it disappeared from focus. Not because it no longer mattered, but because something louder had taken its place. The country moved from reflection to decision, from asking what went wrong to choosing what comes next. In that shift, unresolved issues were not closed. They were carried forward, unexamined. This was not a rejection of accountability. It was fatigue, a collective sense that waiting for answers had taken too long. Before the questions from Mamasapano could fully settle, the election offered something else, not resolution, but a promise. And once again, attention moved forward before the past had finished speaking. As the election conversation grew louder, many questions remained where they were. Filed, referenced, unfinished. Investigations had not disappeared. Cases were still cited. Reports were still archived. Processes were still technically ongoing. But they no longer shaped the public conversation. Accountability had entered a quieter phase, one defined by procedure rather than urgency, where progress was measured in filings, not outcomes. The contrast was subtle but decisive. While institutions continued their work, attention shifted elsewhere, not because answers were found, but because attention had moved on. Media space is finite, as campaigns demanded airtime. Older issues were compressed, reduced to summaries. Occasional mentions, footnotes, in a larger narrative. Questions remained, not unanswered, but unattended, waiting for a moment when attention might return. For many, the election felt like an exit, a way to move forward, without revisiting what had become difficult to resolve. By the time the campaign reached full force, the unresolved issues of the past had not been closed. They had simply been carried into the future, quietly, and without conclusion. And in the space left by unanswered questions, a new kind of language began to dominate. By the time the election reached full momentum, the country was no longer asking for explanations. It was asking for movement. Years of overlapping crises had taken a toll. Political scandals, natural disasters, national tragedy, each came with promises of investigation. Each came with assurances of process. But resolution always seemed distant. The election offered something different. Not detail, not procedure, but direction. The language was simple. Move forward, decide, act. For many, this felt more tangible than waiting for outcomes that never seemed to arrive. Resolution requires patience. Movement requires belief. In moments of fatigue, belief is easier to sustain than uncertainty. Choosing forward did not mean forgetting. It meant postponing. A collective decision to let the future answer what the present could not. In this moment, progress felt like motion, and motion felt like relief. The election was not a rejection of accountability. It was a decision to move, even if some questions had to be left behind. And once that decision was made, the country crossed a line. From expectation to consequence. When the election ended, the conversation changed overnight. The question was no longer what happened before, but what happens now. A new administration took office. With it came a shift in focus. From campaign language to governing priorities, institutions adjusted. Leadership changed hands. Agendas were realigned. Attention followed the present. Unresolved matters did not vanish. They were inherited, carried forward into a system now focused on implementation, not retrospection. The language of public life shifted from inquiry to authority, from explanation to execution. Questions from the past remained, but they were no longer central. The future had arrived, and it demanded full attention. For many, this felt decisive. The uncertainty of waiting was replaced by the certainty of action. Even if some answers were still missing, with the transfer of power complete, the country stepped fully into the next chapter, and once again, the questions left behind had to wait. What followed would dominate national attention, more completely than anything before it. Once governing began, the pace accelerated. There was little room for reflection. The emphasis shifted quickly, from understanding the past to acting in the present. New priorities were announced. Policies were outlined. Directives were issued. Timelines were shortened. Action became the signal that change was underway. Visibility mattered. Decisions were measured by how quickly they could be seen. Movement itself became reassurance. Questions from earlier crises required time. Action promised immediacy. In moments of public fatigue, speed felt like progress. Media attention followed the shift. Coverage focused on what was happening now, not what remained unresolved. The narrative changed. From inquiry to implementation, processes from the past continued quietly. Hearings were scheduled. Documents remained on file, but they no longer defined the national mood. The country adjusted. Action offered momentum. Momentum offered clarity, even if some questions were left unanswered. And so, governance took precedence. Not as a rejection of inquiry, but as a decision to move once again. Action replaced questions before resolution could arrive. What followed would reshape public attention even further and define the next chapter of national focus. By the time the new chapter began, the country had already moved past several others. Not because they were resolved, but because time does not wait for closure. Pork barrel questions remained procedural. Yolanda audits continued quietly. Mamasapano lingered in reports and memory. All technically present, none fully concluded. Public attention followed the present. New actions, new priorities, new urgencies. The past became background. This was no single decision. It was a rhythm. Each crisis arrived before the last could fully settle. Each demanded focus. Each displaced what came before. For the public, this felt natural. Survival requires adaptation. Attention follows urgency. But adaptation has a cost. Unfinished stories remain where they are, not erased, not denied, just waiting, without a moment that demands their return. This is how the pattern holds, not through silence, not through forgetting, but but through movement. One unresolved story gives way to the next, and before answers can arrive, attention has already moved on. This is after the headlines, because the story doesn't end when the news does.